The Green Room at Lift Vancouver is brought to you by Cloud9 Cannabis Coaching. If you have suffered from anxiety, chronic pain, or depression, like I have, you know full well how debilitating it can be. Brady Sparrow, founder of Cloud9 Coaching, specializes in microdosing cannabis to help her clients lead more balanced lives. Whether you've been using cannabis your entire adult life or just now learning about this incredible plant, Brady's simple microdosing guide will help you find the perfect balance in just 1 month. Brady is about to host her first 30-day challenge called Find Your Cloud9 in 30 Dope Days. I'm doing it and you should too. So why not go over to cloud9coaching.com and join us. Be sure to use coupon code Jackie, JACQUI, for a special Green Room discount.
From the industry through the community, right into your home. It's the Green Room, and we're on. What's going on, everybody? This is Lester from Cannabis.Wiki. We are here with the beautiful 2000 and soon-to-be 20. Soon-to-be 20. Cannabis Social Influencer of the Year, Jackie Childs.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to Lift Vancouver.
So who do we got? Who do we got beside us today?
We have our special guest correspondent, Gerald Major.
Hey everyone, yeah, we're gonna
Welcome.
Thank you. First appearance.
Yeah, first appearance.
My anniversary. So
First
we're gonna
appearance in
get
the Green
right
Room?
to it. We got a busy man here, Mr. International, and my personal friend, Deepak and Anand. So you do so much for patients and you're a volunteer, man. Like, I love you, buddy.
Thanks.
And you're doing it international. You're in Canada, you're internationally, so I can't keep track with what you're doing. So let's do introduction. What are you all about?
Yeah, very cool. So thanks for that intro. One of the things that we're doing is getting involved in the medical cannabis supply and distribution business in Europe, particularly in Denmark, Germany, UK, as well as the rest of Europe. The key thing, as you mentioned, is just keeping patients, front and center of mind. It's pretty unfortunate what we've seen in Canada post legalization. Patients have completely been left behind. This is supposed to be about patients, and now it's all about recreational cannabis legalization, right? Whether you look at this from a taxation perspective or you look at this from an access perspective, it still remains a challenge for patients. Today, the average 55-year-old isn't going to go into a cannabis retail store or a dispensary to access their product. They're going to want to go to somewhere like Shoppers Drug Mart, where today they can't go and access their product. So a significant amount of challenge. We're making sure that as Europe starts to evolve and get around this, that their patient access is kind of kept front and center of mind.
So let's follow that, and thanks for mentioning it, because as you know, I'm a patient myself, and I'm extremely patient-centric.
Yeah.
So let's get into the work with CFAM, where we met.
Yeah.
Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, Gerald, such an important initiative, and thanks for being part of it. I think, patients need a voice and a representation. And we saw very early on the licensed producers, tell us that there's going to be unwavering commitment towards medical cannabis patients, and we're never going to let patients down. And sure thing, the first thing that we saw post-legalization was everyone abandon those plans. Now, post-Quebec coming up with issues, and because Quebec's got this restriction on age of access or not allowing vapes as an example, we're seeing a repeat of that, where licensed producers are saying, now we're all about medical patients because we want to have vapes, we want to have edible cannabis products to the medical channel because they want to access Quebec. It really isn't about patients, which is quite unfortunate, but nonetheless a very, very important initiative at CFAM. I think the biggest thing that we have going at Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Cannabis is that we've got the NDP support. I recently spoke with Don Davies, who's been very vocal on the issue of exemption of medical cannabis taxation. I think that's a crucial issue, and I think there's anything that's going to happen politically on this file in the next couple of years that this government's around, it's going to be the exemption of medical cannabis taxation, and that absolutely needs to happen. It's absolutely appalling that in this country we don't tax opioids in which people are dying, but we tax medical cannabis. It's completely unfair and unjust.
So to interrupt you there, how possible do you think it is to challenge that fact?
Yeah, look, I think we're not going to get very far with challenges. I think, historically we've seen challenges presented to cannabis, and it's taken 4 or 5 years. We don't need to challenge it because we've got the NDP that's very supportive of this issue.
We also
and
don't have 4 or 5 years. We have a serious opioid crisis.
Exactly. And we just need to keep pushing that. We've got Don Davies, who's the health critic at the NDP, and he's very, very active and vocal on this file.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just need to use that support and get this past the post. It's not a big ask from a regulator's perspective. Health Canada can very easily enable it. There's not much that needs to be done. And I think if there's one thing that the industry needs to push for, it's for removing tax on medical cannabis patients, because it's unfair and unjust.
Don't tax medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's briefly touch on the opioid crisis, and let's start breaking it out into the masses, right? My opioid story is such that my condition put me on high doses of opioids. I was reducing during the opioid crisis. We have adopted our daughter due to my inability to conceive due to certain pharmaceutical drugs. We adopted her as a result of the opioid crisis. She has lost her birth mother to the opioid crisis. My family has gone through distress because of the opioid crisis, and I was walking last night in the streets in the Hastings area, and I mean, how do you see that here in Vancouver and not talk about it? So we're committed to do some breakthrough stuff on opioids and get that story up to the masses. What have you been able to bring from Canada internationally as far as advocacy and patients? Because when I travel and I talk with people, they think you're a rock star.
Yeah, listen, I mean, so just to circle back, I mean, you know, what you face with your child is certainly extremely unfortunate. We are fortunate in Canada that we don't have people that are being prosecuted for cannabis from that perspective, where we're not seeing, you know, kids being taken away from their parents because they're epileptic. I say legalization has at least helped that issue. There's still a whole other issue on people of color and getting, you know, unfairly prosecuted and all that stuff, which I'll get into in a second. But just I want to, you know, highlight from a high level perspective, at least we don't have that issue. In other countries, though, we're still seeing that issue. You look at the UK as an example. They've got a legal program. They're still getting prosecuted. Like, they're not able to get access because GW Pharma's Epidiolex is the only product they can get at £1,200 a month, which is your entire rent. You know, families can't afford this. And the fact that mothers are still getting prosecuted for this in countries that have legal access regimes are absolutely appalling. So, I mean, that's the first thing that I wanted to cover. So, you know, what we're taking to these other countries is saying, look, the sky's not falling. We've got 350,000 patients in Canada for the past 10 months, or 10 years really, that have been accessing cannabis from a legal perspective, that haven't seen the sky fall. Like, we haven't seen people going berserk on this. It's not interacting with other drugs. There's none of this nonsense happening that seems to be talked about. And like, we can leave the recreational conversation for a second and stay on medical. There's still no major side effects that we've seen here. So what's the harm on legalization?
I don't do bong rips and whatever. Like,
exactly. Bong rips are medical. I know, Carly Starr, you're out there. You do bong rips.
See, but I would like to ask, for somebody like you who talks to municipalities, politicians, policymakers, why wouldn't they listen to somebody like you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there is an aspect of big cannabis. You look at the UK, it's a classical example of big cannabis, where they're the largest exporter of cannabis in the world, yet their own patients don't have access to medical cannabis. I think right there, that just shows you this sort of dichotomy in the system where you've got access, but you don't really have access. And there's a certain amount of lobbying that happens, whether it be big pharma, whether it be big alcohol, or whether it be big cannabis now, where there is that push to make sure that this industry continues to be regulated to a certain extent, right?
We have 2 minutes left with you. What are your hopes for 2020 in the cannabis industry, medicinal side?
Look, I think patients globally should have access to medical cannabis. There should absolutely be no barrier. We don't need to go through clinical trials and do research and worry about all this stuff. Lots has happened over the past decade in a number of countries, Canada included. That's one. And I think the tax has got to go. I think it's completely unfair and unjust to be taxing medical cannabis, and that's absolutely
They have to choose their rent, food, or their medicine. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's
just ridiculous. We're Canada.
Yeah.
Like,
No, absolutely.
This is against our,
DNA.
For patients on fixed income, that is an underdosing policy.
Yeah. No.
Anything else you want to say before you go? Love you, buddy.
Look, I mean, you know, one of the big things we need, Gerald, is we need a lot of support from multiple groups, right? I mean, you know, we've been at CFAM, we've been making a lot of traction and headway, but we can use the support, whether it be patients, whether it be people in the industry. I mean, this medical cannabis taxation exemption is going to help the licensed producers more than anybody else. They're going to have more patients coming to them because now they can get into affordability. So we'd like to have more people come to CFAM and support us with that cause.
Thanks for everything you do, buddy.
No, thank you.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you.
Good to actually put a
Nice
face
to
to the
meet
name.
you.
I didn't realize until you mentioned it. I'm like,
Deepak.
that's Jackie. Okay, yeah.